What is heaven? Is it another dimension, a paradise? Does it really even exist? We're all going to pass from this earth, and knowing what comes next can end the fear of death and bring you peace. Our goal here at Hello Heaven is to answer these questions and many more concerning the afterlife. Welcome to our podcast, Hello Heaven.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast, Hello Heaven. I'm Barry Strohm, your host. I use my ability to speak with spirits to bring you information about the afterlife.
And I'm Connie Strohm, your co-host. Hello Heaven is broadcast on YouTube Live, on our personal Facebook page, and in our Facebook groups. Audios of our broadcasts can be downloaded at helloheaven.podbean.com, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Alexa, and many other audio platforms. We believe that our shows are unique in that we bring you information about the afterlife and heaven, speaking with the spirits. On Hello Heaven, we would like to encourage listener participation through the use of video calls. If you'd like to participate in this program, send an email to onestrom@gmail.com. Tell us about your questions, with whom you'd like to channel, and what you would like to discuss. Barry will get back to you with a time to make the recording. We're currently looking for listeners that have had near-death or supernatural experiences.
Now, tonight we're going to do something a little bit different once again. We're going to tell you about the life of Jesus. My 11th book is entitled Jesus, the Missing Years, and tells you the story of the 33 years in the life of Jesus that are not included in the Bible. The 3 years of his ministries are recorded by multiple sources because he was speaking in public about the one God and performing miracles. Because of his actions, there are many people who were following him and therefore wrote about him and what he was doing. But before Jesus began his ministries, he's living a normal life for 33 years and did not attract public attention. Therefore, no one kept notes about his life. So you see, it's very logical that the truth is not known for the majority of his life.
There is a period in his life of 16 years that Jesus needed to be kept very private, the time that he was married and the father of 5 children. He knew the Romans must never find out about his family for fear that they would take their lives. Jesus knew that he would die at the hands of the Romans and feared that they would endanger his family. The only way to keep his family safe was to keep his family a secret. The only disciple who knew that he was married was Peter, and Jesus trusted him explicitly. It's only through our channeling that we learned the details of his wife and 5 children. We devote an entire chapter to his family in Barry's new book.
Tonight, we're going to briefly discuss the time in the life of Jesus that's not covered in the Bible. Through the ages, the Bible was definitely the best guide to the life of Jesus and will remain the most read book in the world. We will try to have you understand why so many years in the life of Jesus were omitted, and hopefully have you take advantage of now having the information that we are going to make available to you. Most individuals do not understand the timeline in the life of Jesus. Jesus was born around 5 BC during the reign of Emperor Augustus. Herod governed the entire area of Judea at that time and had also included the area of Nazareth, the home of Mary and Joseph. Now, we base this assumption on the fact that Herod died in 4 BC and Jesus had to be born before his death. From our information and the fact that Pilate became the governor of Judea in 26 AD and died in 36 AD, and was under the reign of Tiberius, we've concluded that Jesus was crucified in 31 AD. That would make him 36 years old at the time of his passing. These dates would also indicate that Jesus began his ministries around 28 AD.
Before he began his ministries, Jesus had no followers, and no one, with the exception of John the Baptist and the family of Jesus, were aware of just how special Jesus really was. Therefore, there's a gap of 33 years in which no information about the life of Jesus was contemporaneously recorded. Tonight, we're going to give you some insight into the incredible life of Jesus before he began his ministries. We will speak with the spirits of Joseph, Mary, and Toba, his wife.
Now, in the beginning, the only individuals who knew the baby would be special were Mary, Joseph, and the family. The family of Jesus was poor. They could not write in the difficult Hebrew language. Nobody wrote about the birth of Jesus as it was taking place. So let's begin our show tonight by chatting with Joseph, the father of Jesus, and ask him some questions about the beginning of the life of Jesus. Connie?
Joseph, thank you for joining us again. What did the angels tell you about Jesus before the baby was conceived?
The angels told us that we were going to conceive a very special baby, that it would be very different than other babies, and that the child would grow up to speak of God and to do many wonderful things in its life. In the beginning, we knew that simply that the baby would be special. We did not have details. We did not totally understand, but both Mary and I were speaking with the archangels, and they were telling us both the same thing in dreams. We would discuss our dreams, and we realized that when Mary found out that she was with child, that this was the special baby that that the angels were discussing. So we knew it was going to be special. We knew it was going to be something that we had never heard of before or had seen, but we really didn't know many of the details before the baby was born.
Did you have any children before Jesus was born?
Yes, Jesus had an older brother, James. James was born 3 years before Jesus was conceived, and that was the only child we had before Jesus. But when we were living in Egypt, we did conceive and have a sister for Jesus as well.
Okay, it was very dangerous to travel in those days. Why did you leave the area of Nazareth and travel to Bethlehem with your wife when she was ready to give birth? That was a distance of almost 90 miles.
The angels came to us and told us that King Herod was going to harm the baby. Herod ruled the area of Nazareth where we were living, and he was the ultimate power. He had the ability to kill, to do whatever he wanted to do. The Romans were very brutal, and we started having these dreams that Herod wanted to kill our baby child. The angel said that we would have to leave the Nazareth area and that we would have to travel as far as Egypt, that we would be safe there, but that any of the area of Judea that was ruled by Herod would be very, very dangerous for us. They told us that we would have to stay in Egypt for a period of time. They did not tell us how long, but they told us that we would have to pick up everything and move our family there so that the baby would be safe.
Who traveled with you to Bethlehem?
It was very dangerous in those days to travel, and it was quite a distance. We knew that we were looking at maybe 400, 500 miles to Egypt. So we took our whole family with us. Anne, Mary's mother, Anne's husband, who is the grandfather, would be the grandfather of Jesus. I had 2 brothers that were very strong that I asked if they would travel with us for protection. James, the oldest brother of Jesus. We knew that we had to have a larger group. In those days, if 2 people traveled by themselves, they would be in great danger. There were thieves, murderers. The more that you could travel with in a group, the better off you were. You would try to travel with the trading caravans. The merchants in the caravans were very well educated, and they knew how to protect themselves. So when we left Nazareth, we followed along with a caravan, and for part of the journey, it was just our little group. but there were about 9 of us in total.
When did you find out that Herod was going to want to kill the baby?
The angels started coming to us about 2 to 3 months before Mary was going to give birth. At first, we did not know what to do because we were very poor. We did not have money, and we did not know how we would ever travel that far on our own. We had never really been out of the area. I had been as far as Jerusalem in the past, but I'd never been further than that. And Egypt was a long distance away from us. The angels started to tell us that there was an urgency, that we could not wait because we would have to take the baby if it was going to survive. They said that Herod would have his soldiers watching and would try to kill the baby. We asked the angels why this was going to take place, and they told us that Herod had heard through prophecy that a special baby was going to be born and that it would become the king of the Jews. And he heard from his seers that the baby was soon to be born. Herod wanted to have that title saved for his children, his sons that were going to be ruling after he no longer ruled the area. So he was very determined that he would not allow a baby that would want to have that title to live. Mary and I had never heard of that prophecy, and the angels had never told us that our son would be thought of as king of the Jews. They only told us that he would be very special and that he would speak of the one God. So they were so emphatic that we packed our belongings, sold our properties, and convinced some of my family members to travel with us for safety. And we started to head for Egypt. We knew that Mary was very close to giving birth, and we feared that we would have no way that we could make it to Egypt before the baby came, but that we would go as far as we could. And when Mary decided to give birth to the baby, that we would find a proper place for her to do it.
Why did you go to Bethlehem instead of Jerusalem?
Bethlehem was simply where it was Mary's time. We wanted to avoid Jerusalem because that was the center of Roman power at the time. We felt that if we went to Jerusalem, Herod would have his soldiers search for us and he would have a great chance to find us. Bethlehem was about 8 or 10 miles south of Jerusalem, and it was a much smaller town, but it was on the trade route. And as we approached the area of Jerusalem, Mary started to begin to show signs that she would be going into labor and having the baby. So we decided that we would try to find residence in Bethlehem, and that would be the place where the baby would be born.
How long did you stay in Bethlehem?
The angels told us that we would be safe for a short period of time, and that there would be men that were coming to visit us, that we needed to wait for them to come. As it turned out, we stayed in Bethlehem for around 3 months. The princes, or as you refer to them, the wise men, it was about 3 months after the birth of the baby that they showed up.
What role did the wise men play?
The angels told us that the visitors would bring us presents and that we would be able to use what they brought to help us finance the journey to Egypt. So when the wise men showed up, it was this large group. There were probably 50 plus men in the group. There were soldiers, security. They had their slaves with them. They were truly princes and very rich individuals. And they brought us presents. And the presents were, there was gold, there was silver, there was myrrh, frankincense in small amounts. But basically, they gave us gold and silver to pay for our journey. They said that they wanted to pay homage to this baby, that the angels had told them that this was the Messiah, that this was what God was going to do for the world. This would be his gift. And they wanted to pay homage to him. And they brought these presents. And it was these presents that allowed us to finance the journey into Egypt.
How old was the baby Jesus when they arrived?
The baby was probably 2.5 months old. We were growing impatient, but the angels said that we would be safe for a short period of time. What we had not understood was that the wise men had first gone to see Herod to tell him that they were visiting in the area. And Herod had asked them to come back and tell him the location of where the baby was born. And Herod lied to them and said that he wanted to pay homage to the baby. So Herod was waiting for these princes to return and tell him where the baby was. So it was a period of safety for us. But what the princes did is they chose another route and did not return to Herod and left the area. When Herod found out that they had left without telling him where they were, he had his soldiers kill many of the young, the males. He did that in hope that one of the males that he would kill would be the baby of which he was told in prophecy. But by that time, we had started our journey, and we were far south of Bethlehem.
As the events were taking place, did anyone write down information about this period in the life of Jesus?
No, absolutely not. We didn't even understand how special the baby was at this time. We were poor people. We could not write Hebrew. We could get along, but we never considered the fact that the events of this period should have been written down. Keep in mind that it was only our small group that had been told that this baby was very special. There was no one outside of our group that truly understood. The people that kept the inn where we stayed, the angels had come to them and told those people that they needed to help us. But there was no one that would have ever written down any of the words about what was taking place during the birth of our baby.
Why did you have to travel as far as Egypt?
We had to get out of the area that was controlled by King Herod. Egypt was now being governed by Rome. Augustus had basically conquered Egypt at the time, and Egypt was very important to the Roman Empire. It was a source of grain, a source of trade. And there were many members of the Jewish faith that had fled to Egypt in order to find safety from the Romans. Keep in mind that the members of the Jewish faith were very, very different from the Romans. There were tribes in the Jewish faith that still worshiped idols, but most of them simply worshiped the one God. They had their own ancestral history, their own language, and basically they were very different than the Romans. And because the Romans did not understand them, there were often many difficulties between the Romans and members of the Jewish faith. Many had fled to Egypt before the Romans took over the country. At the time of the birth of Jesus, Augustus had only been in control for several years. And even though the Romans were taking control, there were many people of Jewish faith that had moved to Egypt, hoping that the Egyptians would maintain control of the country and live there in peace. So there were large communities of Jewish people. There were many in Alexandria, and there were many in the small town that we decided to settle in. We did not want to go to Alexandria because that was also an area of Roman strength at the time. So we chose a small community about 50 miles from Alexandria.
Joseph, thank you for joining us this evening. Do you have a final message for us?
Yes, I think that it is very important that all individuals understand the history of the life of Mary and my son. Jesus truly lived. We can vouch for the fact that he was born and we raised him. And there are many, many facts about the life of Jesus that individuals will find very interesting that are simply not recorded. So I want to thank you for allowing me to come through tonight and give you a small amount of the information. I know that it will not be long until the detailed information of his life will be available to many. And I hope that people will take interest in the history and the life of our son. So thank you for letting me speak tonight. You know that whenever we can serve, we are available for help.
And we appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, Joseph. Yeah, you are always a great guest. Thank you for giving insight into what really took place during the birth and early days in the life of your son Jesus. Now, in my book, we go into great detail about this period in the life of Jesus, including a chapter that we devote to the wise men or princes, the Persian princes that brought the gifts and financed actually the rest of the life of Mary and Joseph. That chapter is incredibly interesting. You'll learn their real names, not the ones attributed in the Bible, and you actually hear their thoughts and how their journey went, what took place. A lot of incredible information. So now let's speak with Mary, the mother of Jesus, and have her tell us a little bit about their life in Egypt and when it was time to return to Judea. Connie?
Welcome back, Mary. How long did you remain in Bethlehem?
We were probably there a little over 3 months. As my husband had told you, we were told by the angels to wait until these visitors came because it was the only way that we would ever be able to continue our journey. So for them to make the long journey from where they lived, check in with Herod, come to Bethlehem, and we spent some time with them in Bethlehem. So it was probably around 3 months, but we really weren't keeping track.
How did you find out that Herod wanted to kill your baby?
Well, the first news was from the angels while we were still in the Nazareth area. Had they not told us what they did, we would have never left Nazareth and made that long journey to wind up in Egypt. When the princes came, they were very emphatic that we had to leave. They knew for a fact that Herod was going to attempt to kill Jesus. So they told us that it was time. They gave us the money we needed to do it. And they also told us that they would not return to Herod, and that would buy us some time to get out of Judea. And we left as soon as we could after our discussions with the princes.
So it was the princes that told you it was time for you to leave Bethlehem?
Yes, they essentially told us when the time came. But the angels also came and told us that it was time to leave as well, that we needed to get on the road and we needed to get out of the area of Judea that was under the control of Herod.
Tell us about your journey to Egypt.
It was a very difficult journey. The caravans would come through Bethlehem. So for the 3 months that we were there, Joseph would talk to members of different caravans, get ideas of how we needed to travel and what we needed to do. And when the time came, a caravan was coming through that was headed to Alexandria. Now, I had just given birth a couple months earlier, so Joseph did his best to make it as comfortable for me in my travels as possible. And our family simply fell in with the caravan, and we tried to keep up with them as best we could. The merchants were wonderful people, and I know they would slow up and travel and do the best we could. And they would slow up their travels so that we could keep up. And I think we did a pretty good job. There were times that the weather was very bad. A major storm came in off the Mediterranean. We would not have places to stay. Keep in mind that there were very few inns or places on the caravan routes that we would be able to stay the night. Most of the nights we would have to camp out in the open. So we would build temporary structures, build a fire. There would always be individuals that would stay awake to stand guard because it was very dangerous. There were no good roads. There were basically dirt paths that we followed. But it was a very, very difficult journey. And it took us several months to get into Egypt until we arrived at our destination.
Where did you choose to live in Egypt, and why did you choose that particular location?
At first, we thought we would go to Alexandria, but then the guides or the angels told us that we would be better living in a smaller community, that there were many Romans in Alexandria. There was a small town that you currently call Memphis in Egypt. It was about, I would guess 50 miles from Alexandria. And this little town had a large Jewish community in it where we would be welcomed. So that is the place that we chose to stay. And we were well greeted and had actually a very nice life there.
How long did you remain in Egypt, and why did you choose that particular time to return to Judea?
The angels told us that we should establish ourselves in the area and remain there until not only Herod had passed, which took place very rapidly, but that his son Archelaus would also pass or be removed from power. They told us that his sons were every bit as evil as he was, and that the angels were very sure that the sons had heard the prophecy about King of the Jews, and if they had any clue that our son was the individual that had fled from his father, that they would be only too happy to take his life. So we waited until Archelaus had been removed from power. We knew that one of the sons of Herod was actually a pretty good ruler, Philip, and things were changing in Judea. The Roman emperors were bringing in Roman governors or procurators to control the areas and to govern, and that the area of Judea that was under the control of Archelaus was now under a Roman governor, and they were sure that this governor had no idea about the Jewish prophecy of the Messiah, and it would be safe to travel. They suggested that we go a little bit further away from the area of Nazareth and closer to Galilee, and that the area where Philip governed would be much safer for us.
Will you please tell us about Jesus as a teenager?
Jesus was always very amazing. He never was like the other children. He was always smiling, helpful, willing to share his toys. And as he grew older, he began to become much more independent. When we began our journey back to Judea, he was on the verge of being a teenager and wanted to do many things to help. At that time, his grandmother, Anne, was starting to fail because of her age, and Mary had had another child. So we would have Jesus stay with Anne when possible. Mary's sister was accompanying us on our journey back, and she had had a baby. So we would have them ride in one of the carts. Jesus was always trying to do more than he was capable of doing. He became very friendly with the merchants in the caravan, and he was just this wonderful child. He was incredibly intelligent. He picked things up right away. The merchants loved talking to him. They would tell him of their journeys to the different lands, what they had seen. And the members of the caravan instilled this idea in Jesus that he too wanted to travel and see the world as we knew it at the time. But he was always this wonderful individual. And I guess it all comes down to the fact that we found out he was God incarnate, and he was what you would have expected of him.
Yeah. So, what did you think when you returned to Judea and Jesus told you he wanted to travel?
I was scared to death. I thought he was crazy. When he first told us this, he was only 14 years old, and we did not want a child that young traveling on his own. He was very insistent. He wanted to make his own decisions. He was independent. So we figured out a way of allowing him to start to travel more locally at first. Joseph had a friend that wanted to travel, and he was a very large and strong individual. So we had him travel with the boys when they would go on these journeys for protection. Jesus met John the Baptist after we returned to Judea, and they became wonderful friends. And John would accompany him on many of his journeys. And John was very adept at camping and travels, and he was a very unique individual. But believe me, it struck fear in both Joseph and my heart when we heard that our son wanted to go on these journeys.
Totally understand that. Thank you, Mary. Do you have a final message for us?
Yes. I think that the information that you're learning and of what we speak tonight is very important for people to understand just who Jesus really was. As his parents, we truly knew and loved him and understood much about him, but there were still many things that we did not know or comprehend was what he was going to do in his later life. It is amazing for Joseph and I to realize that our child accomplished so much in his short period of time. Jesus was such a unique individual. He was unique as a baby, a teenager. He was an incredible family man. He loved his children and his wife. He did so much for everyone that was around him. When you learn the truth about Jesus as the human, I think that you will absolutely fall in love with him, and what you know will lay a very, very strong foundation of faith for you. Okay. Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much. At the age of 15, Jesus decided to travel throughout Parthia and the Roman Empire. On most of these travels, he was accompanied by John the Baptist and some of his other friends that he made when he returned to Judea. These friends played a very important role in his life. But on one of his travels, he met a young woman who would become his wife and mother of his children in the future. Her name was Toba. She is never mentioned in any of the Gospels or in the Bible or in any of the Christian writings. We are now going to speak with her spirit, and she'll tell us a little bit about the married life of Jesus. So, Toba, thank you for joining us once again tonight.
Yes, welcome back, Toba. Will you please tell me a little bit about yourself and your family?
We lived east of Galilee on one of the trade routes that was headed into Parthia. My family would trade with the merchants and with the travelers coming through. They would raise crops and sell them. And we lived on the route that Jesus took on one of his initial travels. We would provide food, we would provide shelter for travelers. And when Jesus passed through the area, they stopped at our house and stayed with us for several days. They paid us for a place to sleep. We fed them, and I met this incredible young individual. He was very handsome. He was incredibly intelligent. He could speak about many things. He told us of his life in Egypt and the journeys that he had returning to the area of Galilee. He was just this incredible person. He had these blue eyes, which was very unusual for individuals in our area. When I met him, I knew he was special. And the more we talked, the more I realized just how special he was.
Yeah, would you care to describe him a little bit more for us?
He was young and he was having trouble growing a beard. He stood maybe 5'2", 5'3". He was not overly tall. He had these incredible blue eyes, and his facial features were the only way I can describe it is he was incredibly handsome. But when you talked to him, you understood just how special this young man was. He was wise far beyond his years. I introduced him to my parents, and his parents and my parents understood that this also was a very special person. I was very smitten with him. I knew that when he finished his travels, well, I hoped, shall we say, that he would show the same interest in me. And as it turns out, he did. And our parents arranged to meet his parents, and the marriage was arranged.
What did he tell you about his ministries before you agreed to marry him?
We spoke at length before he asked me to marry him. He said that he was very special. And the time would come when he would have to leave and he would have to devote his life to speaking of the one God. He said that he would influence many people with his life, and he would do many, many good things. He warned me that there might be a time that he would have to leave in order to protect his family. He spoke that he would be talking of things that the Romans would not be very happy about. He said that he would try to lead them away from worshiping their idols. He said that he would work in the Jewish community since he was Jewish, and my family was of Jewish heritage as well. He warned me. He said that there may be a time, but if he had to leave, that he would make arrangements so that the children would be protected and that there would be enough finances to raise the family. So he was very honest. I knew exactly what I was getting into when I married him, and I had never had any regrets.
What was it like to be married to Jesus?
He was the most incredible individual. He loved everyone. Our first child, Sarah, had physical problems. She had what you refer to as epilepsy and was prone to get sick. She would cry at night. He would sit up with her. He would hold her. He would do all of the things that he needed to do to try to bring comfort. And then he would go out and work all day and try to raise the income that was required for the family. He would tell the children, he would tell them that they must never fight, that they must not argue among themselves. He made a point of telling them that they should never do anything to anyone else that they did not want done to them. He was this incredible father, a great parent. He was an incredible husband. In the worst of times, he would smile. He would tell us that things would work out. He spoke to me and my family about heaven. He spoke about an afterlife. He spoke of many things that were not included in the Jewish faith. I knew he was incredibly special. The angels had talked to me as well, but they had not told me all of the details. To be married to Jesus is beyond comprehension. I was so blessed that my soul was chosen to return with him. And we were together for roughly 16 years before he left on his ministries. And they were the most incredible years of my life.
Will you tell us about your children?
We had 5 children. Our firstborn, Sarah, had many health problems, and she passed when she was 14 years old. We had 4 boys. They were wonderful children. They grew up to be wonderful adults. Jesus was very, very close to the children. He taught them to fish. He taught them to do carpentry. He taught them all of the things that they would need to grow up and raise their own families. When Sarah passed, he was absolutely heartbroken. He had done so much to try to preserve her life, but there was really little that he could do at the end. Jesus learned all of the emotions that go with a family. He learned to love me, his wife. He turned to how to love the children. He learned what grief was like to lose one of those closest to you. But he always spoke that we would be reunited, especially with Sarah, when our time came, and that we would return to heaven and we would all be together again. He was just an absolute miracle to be married to.
Why is nothing written about your marriage and the children of Jesus?
Jesus was very fearful that the Romans would find out. He didn't know if there were still any animosities that were left over from the time of Herod, but he knew that he would be speaking against the beliefs of the Roman Empire, not politically, but he would be speaking against their desire to worship idols. He knew that there would be a time that he would be speaking against the Jewish priests. There were many things about the Jewish faith that Jesus did not believe in. He felt that the ministries were so important, but he would also find a time that the Romans were going to take his life. He knew what was ahead for him. He knew on the day that he first spoke the words of the one God, that there would be a time that the Romans would take his life. And he did not want to put his family in jeopardy. He never told the disciples he was married for that reason. He did not want any way for the Romans to find out that he had a wife and children. The one thing that he wanted was to preserve the lives of his family, and he did anything that was required to do it. So there was nothing written about us. Now, tonight, you know the truth, and you've heard it before in some of Barry's messages. The details of his life are about to be disclosed, and I hope that many people will take time to learn the facts and appreciate just who this man Jesus really was.
Yes, we really enjoyed putting that book together and speaking with all of you. What was it like for the family when Jesus left for his ministries?
It was very, very difficult. We had moved back in with my family because he knew he would be leaving. And my father and mother tried to do the best they could to replace him. He essentially told me that we would not meet again until we were together in heaven. I had been preparing for this for many, many years, but when it came, it was terrible. If you can imagine being with such an incredible individual and knowing that when he walked through that door, you would never lay eyes upon him again, put yourself in that position and you will know what I truly felt.
Yeah, so would you have a final message for us?
Yes. I was blessed to be married to the most incredible individual that ever walked the earth. The love that he showed was incredible. He loved everyone. He tried to help everyone. When he left, he sacrificed a family that he infinitely loved in order to help others and to give a message that would establish a new religion, that would lead people to follow commands and words of billions of people. He knew what he was giving up. He knew that he was giving up a family. He was giving up his children, his friends, and he would give up his life. But he did all of this so that he would help humans, that he would tell the humans that there is only one God and that there is a heaven and that all people will go into this heaven. And if you follow the words that he spoke, live a good life, you will truly enjoy the miracles of which he spoke. So thank you for letting me speak once again. I truly appreciate it and will remain to help wherever we can. Goodbye.
Thank you, Toba. We truly appreciate you bringing us the information about your life with our Lord.
Indeed. Indeed. Okay. During the last year, Connie and I channeled 24 different spirits who played a role in the life of Jesus. Once you know the truth concerning the 33 missing years, where no true information was ever recorded, you understand how important this time was in forming the knowledge upon which Jesus built his ministries. I learned information that made his life very believable, and the knowledge of how he lived his total life reinforced my foundation of faith beyond any doubt. My 11th book, Jesus, the Missing Years, A Modern Gospel, tells the story of those 33 years in the life of Jesus in great detail. We now have it available in paperback, hardcover, audiobook, and ebook on Amazon.com. Signed copies are available only on my website, barrystrohm.com and spiritspredict.com. My goal is to make this book available to as many as possible. So I'm going to reduce the price of the paperback by 30% for the weekend of November 1st and 2nd to give everyone an opportunity to participate in the knowledge that's in this dynamic book. If you're thinking about purchasing multiple copies for presents, the weekend of the 1st of November will be your opportunity.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Hello Heaven. Please tell your friends about our shows. They're all meant to prove the existence of an afterlife and improve your life. We will all face the day of passing, and the more you know, the less fear you will have for that day. The archives of all of our podcasts and radio shows are on YouTube, now numbering over 700 videos. The audios of our shows can be heard on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Alexa, Spotify, iHeart, and all the major platforms. The easiest way to download the audio of the show is to go to podbean.com and just search Hello Heaven.
So thank you for listening to Hello Heaven. Our show is relatively new and we hope you're enjoying it. Knowledge of the afterlife will assure that when that final day in your life arrives, you'll have no fear of death. So please tell your friends about our show. Goodbye, and thank you so much for listening. Thank you for listening to Hello Heaven. Please join us Fridays at 6 p.m. Pacific Time on YouTube and Facebook. You can hear us on multiple audio platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, Alexa, and other media platforms as well. If you'd like to appear on the show, send an email to onestrohm@gmail.com and tell us your story. Have a great week. Tell your friends about our show. They'll thank you for it. Music is by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com.